full rights. I never had that feeling, and I never had that background of having really full and equal rights.
We have this idea that we're going to have a democracy, and that we're going to have, it's a state for everybody, and so we have a big problem now because the Arabs supposedly are growing faster than we are, or we have a large population of non-Jews living in the state, and yet we want to keep the Jewish character of the state.
It's automatically convert you to be a second-class or maybe third-class citizen.
The discussion we're having right now is part of is not by accident. Okay, this is a very essential question. What are we as Jews, and what does this country mean?
Well, Jafar, I've got to ask you to be the first to respond. What does it mean to you?
First, let me say, I was shocked from your terminology also. I think there is Islamic movements, and they have the right. Not all Islamic movements are extreme Islamic movements. There is also diversity in Islamic movements, and we have to get, I'm sitting between rabbis here, or at least people that pray. I think me and Nomi the only secular people here in this around this time.
Once in a while.
Yeah. So, nobody thought that Reform Jews are extremists. So, Islamic movement, you have to take in consideration that there is different Islamic movements, different trends in the Islamic movement. But when Jews allow discrimination of the Palestinian minority, when Jews are not able to talk about the Nakba and what happened to the Palestinians in 48 here, about the tragedy that was created in 48, and they allow it, and there is no reconciliation, there is nobody is thinking about saying sorry about, yes, the Jews have rights, and they, after thousands of years, they want to implement their self-determination. But there is tragedies that have been created in this region, and part of this process should also accept the fact that there is a history of somebody else, and there is facts. We are not dreaming overnight when we have babies, we want to be more than Jews now. Let's have more babies, okay? This is not the dream of the Arabs or the Palestinians, and in this region there is more than 300 million Arabs. It's not the question of numbers, it's a question which kind of life. If you want to keep taking the flag of the Arabs and keep telling the Jews, Dir balak, there is Arabs around you, you will never reach to a situation that you first can build yourself and stop discriminate, and then when you discriminate against the Arabs, and this is what we face here, systematic discrimination since 48, then don't say it's a car accident that the Reform Jews are discriminated. Because when part of the Jews are silent on discrimination of the Palestinians, on the Arabs, or they are silent on the issue of occupation, it will reach them. This is what's going on in the name of Jews. Some Jews will do the same things that they are doing against the Arabs to Uri. Why you have to be surprised then? Because this part of the history, also human history, discrimination in Europe started with the Jews and it ended with the communists.
Gershom, you, I think, probably better than anyone on this panel, have your fingers on the pulse of what's happening in the extreme Jewish sector, as it were, among the hardcore of the settler movement, for example. How bad is the situation? How hardcore is it? How blind, as Jaffa might put it, are these people to reality like the existence of another people with its own history and its own problems?
What's happened, first of all, I think it's worth stressing that the extremist movements in each religion are as much a product of the modern situation as the other streams in religion. They are reactions to modernity. In the case of the settler movement, it's a very particular kind of reaction to modernity where extreme nationalism is merged with a religious orthodoxy. This is certainly not a purely Jewish invention. It can be found in elsewhere in the world and in other religious groups here. When Hamas, for instance, merges Palestinian nationalism with a specific kind of Islamic orthodoxy, you see the same kind of meld. And it happens elsewhere in the world with other religions. what's happened in the last couple of years, particularly since the withdrawal from Gaza, is a greater alienation of the settler community from the state. The settlers used to see themselves as the Orthodox settlers used to see themselves as the vanguard of the state, even if the rest of the state didn't regard them that way. After the pullout from Gaza, they suddenly discovered the vanguard looked back and saw that nobody was marching behind them. And this has created a tremendous amount of anger and fury, which is often expressed, as I said, in a mixture of religious and national terms. Any future agreement, settlement that Israel reaches with the Palestinians is going to involve necessarily the evacuation of settlements. And I think that one of the questions which frightens Israelis when they think about that, sometimes subconsciously, is we don't want to get into a violent confrontation with these people, so they stay away from the whole subject.
Nomi, how did this vacuum that Gershon is describing, how was it created? I mean, I know specific examples, like some of the things that happened in large Arab towns or in the city of al-Fahim, where when the government wouldn't provide funding for basic public works, sewage, new school buildings, things like that, the Islamic movement stepped into the breach and through a 10% tithe, which is part of Islamic tradition, they raised the money, they got it done. So that, I know, was one of the ways that they gained popularity. But what else created this vacuum?
Look, you have a systematic discrimination against Israeli Arabs since the beginning of the State of Israel, unfortunately. And only after 60 years is the mainstream understanding that this kind of discrimination undermines the basic values that purportedly are the ones that we're trying to promote in this country. Social justice problems within the Jewish community create the exact same phenomena. If today, just to give you one example, you have 22% of Israelis below the poverty line. 1 of every 3 children in this country lives below the poverty line. That is precisely where fundamentalist movements come. They
among the Jews as well.
Exactly, among the Jews as well. They provide comfort and they provide services where the state is not providing these services. But if I may add just 2 points to this discussion. This process of religious extremism, and I don't care if it takes Jewish forms or Muslim forms or Christian forms, absolutely terrifies me. And it terrifies me because people who have all the answers to all the problems scare me to death. But there's another reason it's more fundamental. This kind of discussion is not a discussion about principles. And I think any serious discussion about the nature of Israeli society has to be a discussion about what kind of society we're trying to promote. If we don't start from the basic principle of equality and tolerance for difference and respect for the other, I'm not sure we have the right to survive. And therefore, the constant incursion of fundamentalist groups in our society, Jewish fundamentalist groups, and yes, Muslim ones, is creating a discourse which makes us forget the kind of values that we're